needless to say, this is a very controversial passage. It was one that I really didn't take into consideration until I saw Kelly when you were debating, when he was debating Bishop Jerry Hayes, that he brought it up. Of course, the passage goes like this, John 5:37, you have neither heard his voice or seen his form. Now, right away, you would wonder why Kelly would bring that up. And of course, if we as modalists or oneness claim that Jesus is the form of God and the voice of God, then what is it? Kelly may have an answer, right? I mean, because what he's stating is that if Jesus was the Father, and they are looking and they're seeing the Father, then why, would Jesus even make that statement? And I think the clues are found, within several passages. Now, I'm going to have to go ahead and really go through this thing, quite quickly. You have to ask yourself the question, and I'm going to read some notes here and so on and so forth. You have to ask the question, why did Jesus make that statement? It's quite obvious that none of them have literally seen the Father's form because God is spirit. And the Jewish people knew that. So this should give us some clue as to what Jesus was actually saying. They didn't recognize the Father's form because the Father was speaking through the Son or by means of the Son or in the Son. To me, it's obvious that Jesus is actually stating that they did not recognize the Father speaking to them, nor did they recognize his form. Okay, so let's go to the general context of what's happening. But before I go into the general context, what I'd like to do is focus on two bookends. Now, there's a bookend at the beginning and a bookend at the end, right? So everything in between, is filler between these two bookends. And if we don't get an understanding of the whole context of what's happening here, we're going to lose sight of what Jesus is actually saying in these verses. So one of the bookends is where John makes a commentary. The Apostle John makes a commentary in John 5, and I don't know what the verse, but I have it by memory. Not only was he calling God his Father, but he was also breaking the Sabbath, making himself equal to God. Okay, and that verse right there, it's really key. The Greek word for equal is isos, which could mean, if you look it up, in your lexicons or your dictionaries, your Greek dictionaries, you'll find that it could mean identical or the same. Now, most of our translations are going to be equal because most of our translations are translated by Trinitarians, right? And so they're going to say, well, the Son was equal to the Father, whereas I think more accurately, I would say that what the Jews understand is that Jesus was actually claiming to be God himself, the same identical person. Okay, so with that in mind, okay, what we see is Jesus is encountered. This is the general idea. Jesus is encountered by the Jewish people because he just went ahead and he went and healed a man. The man reported back to the Jewish leadership. The Jewish leadership said, what's going on here? Who was it that's, healed you and all that stuff? And he says, well, it's this guy by the name of Jesus. So they went ahead and they encountered him again. So the Jews sought all the much more to kill Jesus. And that's where we get into that passage in verse 18, where he says, not only was he calling God his Father, but making himself equal or the same with God. Then comes the astounding statements. Okay, these statements are really important in verse 19. These statements are equivocating the Father as the Son. Then answered Jesus and said to them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he seeth the Father do. For what things soever he doeth, these the Son also doeth. Now, everything that the Father does, Jesus is doing. Okay, this is coming out of the mouth of Christ. And so the Father shows him all things, and whatever the Father does, again, he does these greater works than these. Okay, and these great works. And so as the Father raises up, so even the Son quickeneth and raiseth up, right? For the Father judgeth no man, but hath committed all judgment to the Son. And then all men should honor the Son, even as they honor the Father. He that honoreth not the Son honoreth not the Father. So here we see a common theme going on here. Whatever the Father does, the Son does. Okay, so what is Jesus actually, what is it saying here? So I believe that the Apostle John is conveying that whatever the Son does, he does as the physical representative of the Father. So to start, I want to reference two verses which seem to be contradictions, okay? And I think it's really key in looking at these two verses. Upon further investigation on these controversial passages, I think these controversial passages or verses that seem to indicate contradiction, these verses cause us to probe more and search more. And what ends up happening is we end up gleaning more out of what's actually being said here. And so here is the contradiction. This is the key to understanding this whole passage, I believe. In John 5:31, it states, if I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. Right? Okay, right away, one would come to the conclusion, well, then Jesus needs another witness. Right? And yet in John 8:14, it states, his witness is true, okay? Because Jesus answered and said to them, though I bear record of myself, my record is true. Well, just a moment. It's almost the same exact construction. In fact, it's the same word. Witness and record are exactly the same word, martyro, okay? So here we have to somehow figure how we can harmonize this this thing that seems to be a contradiction. And so this is what I'm thinking is happening here. I believe Jesus is making the statement of fact that the Jews, no matter what Jesus stated, did not regard Christ's testimony as being true. We know this according to John 8:13, because he says, so the Pharisees said to him, you're testifying about yourself. Your testimony is not valid. But the whole point that he makes in 18:14 is that he doesn't need anybody to testify. He doesn't need somebody else to testify. He's God, and what he says is true. You as humans need that, but not me. And so here we go back to John 5:31. If I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. Well, then how do we harmonize this thing? So this is the reason why he makes the statement, I believe. If I'd be a witness of myself, my witness is not true. According to them, Jesus then proceeds to talk about John the Baptist, okay? What I think he's doing is this. He's making a statement in John 5 that this is what they see Jesus doing. This is what they're accusing him of doing. Like me saying, look, if I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true, according to you guys, basically, is what he's saying. And so, according to them, Jesus proceeds to talk about John the Baptist and that they themselves call upon John. And again, in verse 34, he says, but I receive not the testimony of man, but these things I say that ye might be saved. Now, number one, Jesus then continues to talk about John the Baptist. Okay, I'm trying to go through this thing so fast, guys. I'm sorry, I'm limited on time. He's going ahead and he continued to talk about John the Baptist and that they had received him and his testimony for a season. In other words, why can't they receive my testimony? Because John the Baptist basically testified of me, right? They received him for a season. Number two, and then when they had received one another, they received each other's testimony. Okay, then why could they not receive the testimony of Christ? They receive each other's testimony. This is the whole point, right? And in verse 43, he states, if another shall come in his own name, notice he states that others come in their own name, they will receive him. But when Jesus comes in the name of the Father, being that it is tied with the statement in their own name, okay, I believe that he's stating that he is coming in his own name, namely the Father. Okay, now this is the point that there is no contradiction between those two verses in chapter 5 and chapter 8. And so what I'm thinking that what he is stating here is that when he says no one has heard his voice, he doesn't need anybody's testimony. I mean, anybody else to testify of his validity. In Genesis 22:16, he says, I have sworn by myself. In Hebrews 6:13, he says, by myself, I have sworn. In Hebrews 6:13, he says, he could swear by no one greater. So he swore by himself. In Exodus 32:13, it states that, your servants to whom you swore by yourself, right? And of course, in John 17, you sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth. So another thing that we want to go into is the voice and focusing on the voice and the form. Real quick, we understand that Jesus in John 12:49 stated that I did not speak on my own initiative. In John 3:34, he says, for I did not speak on my own initiative again. And so here in John 5:37-38, he states, and he says, and the Father himself, which hath sent me, hath borne witness of me. Ye have neither heard his voice at any time, nor seen his shape. Now, earlier I alluded to the understanding that, guess what? Well, was this the same crowd that maybe heard the voice during his baptism? I think so, right? Why? That's the reason why he brought up John the Baptist, because the Jewish people, the Jewish leaders kept on going back to John the Baptist over and over again. I think there's a reason why he brings that passage up, okay? And so his voice, you got to keep these two things in mind. His voice, they have not heard or heeded, okay? So we already said in John 3:31, he who comes from above is above all. And later on in verse 32, he says, what he has seen and heard of, he testifies, and no one accepts his testimony. No one accepts his testimony from the one who comes from above, right? And in Hebrews 1:2, we understand that in these last days has spoken to us by his Son. It was the Father that spoke to us by his Son. And in John 12, it says, if any man hear my words and believeth not, I judge him not, for I came not to judge the world. He that rejecteth me receiveth not my words. And and the word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last. For I have not spoken of myself, but my Father which sent me. He gave me commandment what I should say and what I should speak. So whatsoever I speak, therefore, even as the Father said unto me, I so speak. So he is speaking as the voice of God. Now, John 14, it says, the words that I speak unto you, I speak not of myself, but the Father. And then yet in John 6:63, it says, the words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. And my sheep hear my voice in John 14. Okay. And they follow him. Okay, so the voice of God is important to understand, that he is speaking as the Father because it's God the Father that's actually speaking through Christ. Now, of course, these men may have heard God speaking from heaven, but Jesus makes that statement that they have neither heard his voice or seen his form. Now, why would they even bring up the form of God? Why would he even bring up the form of God? Because I believe that what he's actually stating is that since God, is spirit, and according to Luke 24:39, for a spirit hath not flesh and bone as you see me have. John 4:24, God is spirit. John, Deuteronomy 4:12, but you saw not his form. And then in John 1:18, no man has seen God at any time. This is the invisible God. So we have to understand when Jesus is making alluding to the understanding of not hearing his voice and not seeing his form, they are not recognizing that he is the Father speaking to them in this form. Okay, so Christ is the form of God, that the express image of God, God manifest in the flesh. We all understand that. We go to Philippians 2, Hebrews 1:3, Colossians 1:15. The Son is the image of the invisible God. 1 Timothy 3:16, God was manifest in the flesh. And so what we have to do is we have to understand that in fact, what's really interesting about this word form, the Thayer's Greek lexicon says that the word is eidos, okay, which means shape, that which strikes the eye visually, okay. So here, the reason why he's standing there talking to these individuals, he's already gone ahead and stated all this stuff between the two forms. They've already accused him of being God. They know that that's what he's stating, that he's God. The other side of that is the fact that he says, you search the scriptures. This is the other bookend. You search the scriptures, for in them you find life, but these are the things that testify of me. If you would have believed Moses, you would have believed me, for Moses wrote about me. That's the other bookend, right? So all of this encompasses who God. So who did Moses write about in the Old Testament? Well, of course, it was the Father. It was always the Father that was written of in the Old Testament. So, in conclusion, I'll just skip over a lot of this stuff that I've got here. We notice that Jesus here reiterates the fact that he doesn't receive honor from men, and that if he comes in the Father's name, they don't receive him. I believe Jesus is making a case that when he states that he comes in the Father's name, that he's coming in his own name. Why do I believe this? Because I believe the answer lies in verse 43b, that he states, if another shall come in his own name, you receive him. Notice he states that others come in their own name and they will receive him. Well, if he comes in his own name, which is the Father's name, okay, they don't receive him. This is the key to understanding this verse. I think Christ is emphasizing the fact that he is coming in his own name, namely the Father's name, and not the Son's name, especially the second person of the Trinity's name, God the Son. Herein lies their indictment. How can you believe, which receive honor one of another, and seek not the honor that cometh from God alone, or only? That's the same word, alone. The word here, mono, in the Greek refers to solitary soul, a solitary one, and only. And in my words, God by himself. That's it.